So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And alhamdulillah. Wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I would like to welcome you all to our monthly family night that we do on the first Saturday of each month. And the goal of the family night is to give us an opportunity to unite the hearts of our communities, inshallah, both in person and online. And the purpose of it is decreasing love for each other for Allah's sake. As we do these family nights, we have some fun, we have some family, we have some food. So we do a little talk, so it just won't be all of that, just all social stuff. And we try to give ourselves some reminders, inshallah. So we thank you all who are here in person and those who are joining us online.
Sit however you want.
Okay. All right, so alhamdulillah, so we always proceed to the family night by a little brief talk, inshallah. And so tonight will be relatively brief. And so I wanted to talk about this topic, which is called therapy for children. Therapy for children. So I was reading this book. It was by a psychotherapist whose name is Dr. James Davies. Dr. James Davies. And he has a book. It's called Sedated: How Modern Capitalism Created Our Mental Health Crisis. Sedated: How Modern Capitalism Created Our Mental Health Crisis. And in this book, he discusses about how there has been a gross interpretation of what mental illness is, and what has led to the mental health crisis. And so he is from England, and he did a study, and he got up some stats, and he said that there was an epidemic in psychiatric drugs and prescription medicine that increased since the 1980s. And he also mentioned that one in four people are diagnosed with some type of mental illness every year in England, and in America is 1 in 5. In America is 1 in 5. And so he also highlighted that as each year, as the prescriptions for these mental illnesses went up, so did other illnesses came into play, and they also increased. So in other words, as people were getting so-called cures for these, mental illnesses or mental health issues, then the mental health issues and the mental illnesses also increased. So there's like a contradiction there, because if there's an increase in what's supposed to cure you, then the thing that is the sickness is supposed to subside at some point. But we all see now in England and in America that there's an increase in mental illness and there's an increase in these drugs. And so, something ain't adding up, something ain't adding up. And now we also have, a pandemic with, prescription drugs, psychiatric drugs, all of these things. And so in the book, he also argues that the theory of the so-called mental health crisis, and he says that he argues that it is flawed from the beginning. He said because the theory is based on the assumption that mental illnesses arise within what they call the broken brain of the individual sufferer. So in other words, they say that a person individually, there is something that's inside that's wrong with them that need to be repaired. And so as they diagnose and they determine what kind of prescription drug that they can give them to fix the issue, then that's supposed to fix the issue. But not only do these drugs not fix the issue, but they create other issues when people are taking these drugs. And so they did a study in like some nursing homes. They said, elderly people are taking between 5 and 9 different types of drugs. And they had to take more drugs because one of the drugs that they taken, then it led to some type of mental issue or some health issue, and they had to take another drug. And then the whole answer is to give more drugs, instead of really diagnosing what could be some of the extenuating factors that cause people to have mental illness or mental health issues, right? And so he said that this broken brain approach, they base it on what they call a biochemical or biomedical model of mental illness. In other words, the biomedical or biochemical model, it views health in binary terms, either that a person is healthy or a person is not healthy. So in between that, there's a whole spectrum that can be explored. So it's kind of like an either or approach. So if you have one minor thing, you could be healthy. If you have one minor issue, then all of a sudden you become not healthy. And I think in a joking manner, if you ever saw the comedian Chris Rock in one of his stand-ups, he talked about this issue. He said, you remember when those commercials used to come on late at night, and they'd be like, "Are you suffering from depression? Are you suffering from, whatever they named it?" And then you start thinking like, "Yeah, I got that." Do you get up in the bathroom in the middle of the night? Then you may be suffering from this, or something like this. If you do this, that, and the other, something that might be relatively normal or not even major, they will make you think it's some type of illness. And then, they put in the mind of the person that, okay, yeah, I do got a problem. So let me go see the doctor. And then the doctor will prescribe you a medication and then increase the dosage. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but, because some people do need prescription medicines and they work. But then how are you diagnosing people who may not have had as severe an illness, and then all of a sudden their illnesses start to increase with the medicine they start to take? And so this binary approach, either healthy or not healthy, is not taking in consideration like external factors. And so that was the topic of the book, because capitalism is an external factor. But we get to that in a minute, inshallah. And so basically, he is saying that how people become worse off with these treatments, and he explores capitalism as a means, as extenuating factors or external factors. So in the current model, they examine your brain, they examine your body, they look for these illnesses, and then they just give you a prescription, but they don't pay attention to external factors. So for instance, say if you have a liver disease from alcohol, a person, consumes alcohol, and, they develop a liver disease. And then they give some type of treatment for the liver disease, or maybe a replacement, whatever they do. But what about the factors of depression and poverty and discrimination and all of those things that leads a person, to consume alcohol? And what about just getting rid of alcohol, altogether, making it haram as it is, and making it haram in this country as it is according to the Islamic law? And so these are factors that they don't look into. So, they will, allow a person not to look at their, situations surrounding them that leads to depression or anxiety or any of these mental disorders. And then, once they develop these disorders, now we're going to give them some medicine. So, and it's a big, it's a big industry in the pharmaceutical hustle. And so then there's he mentioned, well, no, he didn't mention, but I looked this up about mental health conditions for people. It is said that 46% of Americans will meet the criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition sometime in their life. And half of those people will develop conditions by the age of 14. And so this is taken from the National Institutes of Health, the National Library of Medicine. And so if you think about this for a moment, think about how they're doing, a lot of children, they're classifying them as having attention deficit disorders, or, the other things they're saying. And it may just be something about their learning style. It may that, they might can't be a student that sits in the classroom and can just, do rote learning, or, rote memorization, or sitting at a desk all day and teach in a way that they're teaching. They might learn a different way. They might be right brain learners. They may be more artistic and not as mechanical and stuff like that. They might be a little abstract instead of just being logical. All students learn different. But when you put them all in the same classroom and expect them to, perform according to a state mandated test, and then the child doesn't pass the test, now the child has got some type of mental disorder. And, a lot of people are allowing their children to, being diagnosed like this. But that doesn't mean the child is, not smart because they can't pass a state test. How many children that we know are gifted in many other areas, but they might can't read the English language that good, or might can't really know different things at school, but they're very bright. Dr. Jawanza Kumjufu, if you're familiar with him, he writes a series of books about educating Black children and some of the techniques. He said a statement that's very profound. He said, when dealing with students, he said, if students don't learn the way you teach, you have to teach the way that they learn. If students don't learn the way that you teach, you have to teach the way that they learn. And then he has a few books that you can look him up there. And back in the 80s, he wrote a book, The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, or Young Black Boys. And so he's written many works since then. So I would advise us to check out some of his works. Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, I think he's out of Illinois, inshallah. So this is the approach. So now they're saying that half of these people, 46% of Americans, will meet the criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition sometime in their life, and half of those people will develop conditions by the age of 14. So, what is the criteria? This is something we should ask. What is the criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition? Someone might be, they might, have an issue where they might be jittery, or they might be having claustrophobia or something, or whatever it is, and now they diagnose them as having a mental disorder, and then they give them medicine when it could have been another alternative, or it could be something, an external factor that affected them that should have been looked into before they just jumped to giving them medicine, right? And so Dr. James Davies, I took a quote from his book. It was pretty profound. And so this brings us to our topic when we talk about therapy for children, right? He said in the book, for many children, the truest and most effective therapy won't be found in a pill, a consultancy room, or a classroom intervention, but in loving and meaningful human relationships that endeavor to mitigate the harsher social forces and impacts they neither perceive nor understand. And so this was very profound that I thought. So in other words, he's saying that, you know, these people are telling us by the age of 14 that half of adults by the age of 14, they will develop these mental conditions that they will be diagnosed as having a mental disorder, and not paying attention to these other factors that they may have been deprived of, like love and nurturing and caring and attention and communication and affection from parents and relatives, and being raised in the village and having someone as a mentor, having someone as a tutor, and all of these things that help a children develop in their social lifestyle. And this is very important. So they're diagnosing children by the time they're young, saying that they have these issues, and then the mind starts thinking that you really have these issues. If somebody calls you dumb long enough, you might start to believe that you don't. Someone tells you, and these words, words have power. If people start telling you things, then you start to believe them, And so this is like this is the technique that they use, just tell a person that they have this order, it's coming from a professional person, and then give them this medicine, and now this medicine don't work, then increase it has another effect on them, and give them another medicine, and all the while they needed another approach to begin with, So the theory is flawed, and this is what the Dr. James Davies argues in his book. And so when we look at all of that, inshallah, we think about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. There's a section in the Quran in Surah Al Furqan, the 25th surah. This 25th surah, and near the end of the surah, starting from around ayat 62, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a whole section where he gives the characteristics of the servants of Ar-Rahman, wa Ibadur Rahman, it's a very good section to always refer to. So the characteristics of the slaves of the most merciful. And this name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ar-Rahman, it is the only name that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala substitutes for his name Allah. It is the only one that takes the place of the name Allah. So you'll never read in the Quran where Allah says, Wa ibadul latif, or Wa ibadul malik, Wa ibadul aziz. It's always Wa ibadul rahman, or whatever he using, where he refers to himself as Ar-Rahman. And you think about that for a moment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if that's the only name that he uses to replace the lafzul jalala, the majestic utterance, Allah, so he wants you to know that the replacement of his majestic name, the only thing that is suitable to replace it is Ar-Rahman. And what does Ar-Rahman mean? The one whose mercy is all encompassing. For everything in creation gets the experience of Rahman from that name Ar-Rahman, And then of course we know Ar-Rahim is the mercy that is exclusive to the believers, a special mercy for those people who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Muslims. And so in this ayat, in this section, he starts, Wa ibadur rahman alladhi yamshuna ala al-ardi hawna, and the servants of the most merciful are those who walk on the earth with humility. Wa idha qatabahum al-jahiluna qalu salama. And then he says, and then when the ignorant address them, they say salama. So it's giving us a criteria of how to deal with people as representatives of the Rahman that we get from Ar-Rahman. Then the first thing we do is we humble ourselves and we ignore people. In our terms today, we ignore haters. We ignore people who address us with ignorance and stupidity and things like that are beneath us. We let things slide off that are not going to benefit us, and we learn how to tune people out because it's not beneficial in any way. So now, in another, as you go read that, I would encourage all of us to, read that section. I mean, it would be something that we have to discuss in another discourse about that whole section about the service of Ar-Rahman and all those characteristics. But I just want to mention one that relates to this talk today, inshallah ta'ala. In ayat 74, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. He says, and those who are the servants of Ar-Rahman, is a continuation in the series of ayats, and those who say, our Lord, grant us from among our wives and our offspring comforts to our eyes, and make us an example for the righteous. So in this ayah, it is embedded that a person who is a servant of the most merciful is making dua for the wives and the offspring to be righteous, to be a coolness to the eyes. So what does this mean? When we're developing a family structure, the first thing that we're making dua for is our spouses. And of course, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught us that when we look for a spouse, that we look for four things: the beauty, the wealth, the lineage, and the deen, right? And he said that the one you find the one for the deen, Turi bat yadak, that may your hand be covered in dust, which is an Arabic phrase like, may you be successful when you find a righteous wife, you know. And so it begins not just looking for a righteous wife, that all of those elements you look for, but the one that should stick out the most is the dean. So you, of course, as men, you know, we like to look for pretty women. We like, and nowadays, we like to look for women that got bread. You know, you hear brothers, oh, she broke, I don't want to deal with her. You know, and then on the flip side, when a woman, it's funny that when a woman's saying these days that all she wants from a man, you know, it's not all that she wants, but he got to have some money. And brothers get mad, you know. But you know, then we look for women that have bread. So you know, there's got to be some middle ground. And look for a woman who comes from a good family. You know, she was raised correctly. You know, mother and father, and you know that she wasn't subjected to things that would affect her psychologically. You know, which is something that happens in our community more often than not. You know, we're talking about abuse and these things like that. And then look for one for the deen. And so we start out the people who are the slaves of Al Rahman, the servants of Al Rahman. They are making dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them wives and gives them offspring who will be the coolest to their eyes. There will be people, you know, people of virtue. So it starts, you know, before we even have children, that we make the dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us good children and give us good spouses. And then if we're looking for good spouses, it assumes that we are ready to be good spouses. We are ready to be good husbands. You know, that's why we're looking for a good wife, you know, and then we have to start thinking about this, you know. If you're not ready to be a good husband, and you should know yourself well enough to know if you're ready to engage in the responsibility of marriage, not just the love and the romanticism, but the responsibility of marriage. And that is taking care of people in spite of your own self, especially as men, taking care of wives and offspring in spite of your own self. So that means that you know you ain't gonna always have a glory day. It ain't always gonna be, you know, happy times for you. But if your family is the coolest to your eyes and you work towards that, then that is a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you, because you are the servant of Al Rahman. You know, you are the servant of the one who is the most merciful. And then, and make us an example for the righteous. وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Make us imams for the righteous. So this is an indication for men. They have to be imams, you know, not imams like me, you know, great imams, spectacular imams. We're just talking about imams in general. You know, I'm just joking, but you know, be a leader. You know, as a husband, you develop yourself to be a leader. You put this dua in the air that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send you a spouse that will complement you, and then you make dua for righteous children, and you do all of those things that will, you know, put that in place. And so this is how we develop children who are, you know, have therapy already by dua. You know, then they have a loving family, they have loving neighbors, they have loving, you know, people that's going to take care of them. And so by that time, we're not letting people diagnose them when they're 14, because, you know, they've already had a whole life of nurturing and caring and communication. And, you know, you think about this hadith, that there was a man who came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissing his grandsons, playing around with them, Hassan and Hussein, right? And he said, "I have 10 children, and I don't kiss any of them." Can you imagine that? 10 children. He, you know, he just, you know, he not no affection, no communication, no cultivation, no nurturing, no, you know, asking them how they're feeling, how is their day, stuff like that. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't just leave it to like, you know, that's his business. He said, "Innahu la yarham, la yurham." He said that whoever, verily the one whom doesn't show mercy will not be shown mercy. And so mercy is in affection. Mercy is in communication. Mercy is in, you know, being playful with your children. You know, mercy is in listening to their ideas and encouraging them and enlightening them, and, you know, helping them to develop, and giving them good words and giving them sound advice, and, you know, not being, you know, servants to the children, but being, authoritative and, having authority, but without being overwhelming or overburdening to a child where they feel like they don't want to listen. So it's a lot of work that goes in, developing the therapy for a child. And this is something we have to work on because when we start raising our children and they come and we already put them at a disadvantage when they're not together, when you don't have a solid family structure. And of course, nowadays, we know people don't necessarily have to be together for that to happen. And this is something we have to learn as people, because, and I'm talking about people as our people, of course, Muslims, we're supposed to be a grade above everybody else. But in the areas that we live in, we are microcosm of the people that we live around. And the people that we live around, a lot of single mothers, a lot of broken homes, a lot of enmity between the mother and father where they're arguing and the children are suffering because the mother and father can't get along for whatever reason, And these are some of the things that we have to fix because when children are growing up and they reach this age of 14, and incidentally, when we talk about that age is very important because the story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam when he came back for his son Ismail, and they said when he reached a certain age, they say that the age was around 14 when he came back to him and he said, I had to sacrifice you. I saw in a dream that I had to make a sacrifice for you. So some of the ulama say that age was around 14, around the age where, kids start to, they're kind of young adults, and they know right from wrong very well. They're able to formulate things. They're able to see through things. They're able to form their own opinions independent of what they've been taught. That's around the age they start, feeling themselves. They just at the brink of, I'm not ready to go there, but I feel like I know something that, my parents don't know. And then these external factors, what Dr. Davis is talking about in the book, so many external factors that they're not aware of that they're going to be exposed to. And these become the problem, what leads to these other so-called mental illnesses that we're not even looking into. So we have to try to eliminate those extenuating factors that's in society, and how it translates today is, we in a rat race of trying to get the bag. We're in a rat race of trying to, move on up and, what they call it, phrase, keeping up with the Joneses. I don't know, I got some elders in here, but keeping up with the Joneses, trying to keep up this appearance that we're living good and that we are well off and that we're not poor. But then the factors of discrimination and poverty and being deprived of a lot of things that has affected our mentality that doesn't really make us sick, but it had an impact on us. And had those factors not been in place, we could have been better off, But us in this rat race of capitalism and trying to pay a mortgage and paying insurance and paying all these things. And, I remember I met this brother I worked with one time and he was from Ghana. And, he was always stressed, like he would always work. He would never take a break. And I used to ask him like, yo, bro, why relax, we got a break. He said, no, I got to work this, that, and the other. And I said, well, why? He said, because this is America. He said, we got mortgage and car payments. And I said, well, how are they doing in your country? He said, man, we don't pay all this stuff. He said, this stuff is like, it's free. The government sponsors it. The government pays your mortgage and all of your utilities, and you get a stipend. So, of course, people are not like, super rich, but, they're not really poor, and they're not really working themselves to death just to trying to make ends meet. We're living in a time now that everybody is nobody's a failure on social media. Everybody's balling and living good, but in reality, and they did studies on this, they said 70% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. You know, and they say you're supposed to be able to save up 6 months to a year in case you lose a job. But the reality is, if a lot of us lose our jobs, we gonna have some hard times. A lot of us got jobs, and a lot of us are working a lot of hours, and it's still, it still ain't enough because we can't stop. We stopped, and things start to, start to pile up, and then, And so this capitalistic system of keeping us chasing the dollar and keeping us chasing this dream that if we do all of this and we tie ourselves up by the bootstraps and keep working, one day we'll be like Warren Buffett, but not considering that those people inherited wealth through crime. Look at the history of how people got their wealth in this country. It wasn't through no hard work. It was through manipulation. It was through sabotage. It was through espionage and all of these things to obtain massive amounts of wealth. And then it was on the backs of the labor of our people who came here. So they didn't like work hard and build up a fortune and they earned it. No, they didn't. They got it by any means necessary, and all of those means weren't always legit. And so we have to look into that. And so we're trying to chase that same dream. This is what the doctor is arguing in his book. And these things are the factors that's affecting our mental health, not because of some biochemical disorder within ourselves. It's these external factors. How now we've been subjected to these external factors, we would have been well. When we ain't got this pressure of trying to pay this and keep this and the things arise when we're trying to make ends meet and we're trying to buy food and then, they put restrictions on what we can buy. You can't grow certain things. And all of these things is having an impact that's driving us crazy and trying to make a living. And so that's the argument. But for us, we just got to take a step back and really find the solutions in our religion, and it starts with man and woman, adult men and adult women, praying for each other, and particularly the man, because in Islam, the man still has, some virtue, and even though it seems to be waning these days, but the man still has virtue and the man still has a great responsibility. And when the man steps into his role of responsibility, then the woman that he prayed for, that he wanted, she will be complementary to him. You read all these things about this common thing, and it's all based around this capitalistic view of how to earn money. You hear people say, what's wrong with people? They want to go 50-50 relationship. What kind of man, wants to go 50-50 and on the bills and all this kind of stuff? So, all you got to do is change the language on that. If you're a husband and a wife, if you're in a partnership, then you're going 100-100. You giving 100%, you giving 100%, and we just adjust as we go. So don't make it all about who's supposed to do what, And in these times, 50-50, you might have to settle because, it ain't like you find a lot of rich brothers out there and, not a lot of rich sisters either. So we have to really work around and see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us and concentrate on the things that mean the most. Having a responsibility as a husband, stepping into marriage, making dua for a proper woman, recognizing when you see her, and not overlook the righteousness because of other factors that we may be paying attention to as men, or even like on the opposite thing, where women are paying attention to things about men and not looking for men who are leaders, men who are imams, men who have taqwa, men who have a concept of responsibility, and because it starts with us, and we'll start to see our communities heal when we start taking these steps, being practical in who we seek to marry, making dua about righteous offspring, and when Allah blesses us with offspring, start nurturing them and cultivating them and taking care of them. So when they reach that age and then they have to go outside, we don't have to worry about too much. Of course, we're always going to worry, what they're exposed to, in the areas that we live in. Our children can go out and get caught up in some type of, gunfire or anything, But when you raise them right, you don't have to worry as much because you did your part. That you trained them. That you taught them what to look for. You taught about all of these external things that they might not perceive and understand. But when you have communication, when you have intimacy with your children, you have love, you have nurturing, all of these things that go into the proper development of a child that will give them therapy. So they want to get therapy from these other sources, with people who are just waiting to put them in a box, by giving them drugs and diagnosing them as certain things and sometimes killing their potential. So we should think about that. So therapy starts with us as parents. And and it's never too late, even if we didn't get the therapy, even if we were deprived of some things, even some things that our parents missed in raising us, they might not have known. You know, they might have been subjected to things that, especially the generation that came before us, they didn't really talk about these things. They just, they kept them in the closet and they just hid them, And so this is the healing power of Islam because it gives us a complete outlook of how we're supposed to live our lives and realizing that all of this is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and realizing that we are the slayers of our Rahman. So it all stems from that all encompassing mercy, you know, and that we are always in a state of practicing it or trying to receive it, trying to give mercy and trying to receive mercy. And that involves forgiveness, that involves flexibility, that involves letting things go, that involves ignoring people who are ignorant, ignoring people who don't mean us any good, ignoring people who are not going to help us get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the ayah says, وَإِذَا خَطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. And when the ignorant address them, they say peace, salama, be on your merry way. I don't have time for it. So this was the talk we have for today, inshallah. Thinking about, therapy in children, it starts with therapy in the parents, making sure that as we enter into these marriages, or if we already been in marriages for a while, start taking a closer look at, what all of the stuff that we're doing and what is it for, and that's what we talked about this book. And I'll repeat the name of the book for those who might want to try to purchase it. It's called Sedated: How Modern Capitalism Created Our Mental Health Crisis by Dr. James Davies, Davies. It's a good book to read, and it explores this whole, I don't want to say scam, but this whole thing about the pharmaceutical industry and, the mental health crisis and how it was developed, that there was an agenda behind it, to classify people as having these issues. You give them medicine, so they create the sickness and then give you the cure, and that keeps them in business. And we have to be aware of this kind of stuff. And they put us in situations where we have to keep turning to them, where we forget about, just things that, matter more, about having quality time and having time for yourself and being in tune with nature, And then for Muslims, taking time to reflect, to make dhikr, to get up at certain times, to make tahajjud prayer, and have a moment of tafakkur, having reflection and contemplation, doing good deeds and taking a break from this dunya whenever we can. Of course, the times we living in, you can't live without a phone. You really can't live without technology. You really can't get around unless you have some transportation. You need all this stuff, but put it in perspective where you control it and it's not controlling you, and it has an impact on your mental health and subsequently on your physical health and your spiritual health. So those are things that we need to look out for because we have children that we have to give this energy of love and mercy and compassion to, because a lot of them are missing it nowadays. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq, for success. So we'll stop there. I don't know if there's any question and answers. I mean, not question and answers, just questions. Uh, do we have any online? It shouldn't be that many because I don't do talks with people that ask questions.
I don't see any questions.
Yeah, and even if you have questions, I have the right to not answer. Okay, alhamdulillah.
We seem to be good.
Yeah, so we'll stop there. So for our online family, we thank you for tuning in. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted from us. So now we'll continue with our part of the family night locally where we engage each other, talk, have discourse, break some bread. We wish you all could be here with us, but mashallah, maybe one day you'll be able to visit us and, see how we get down, as a community, as a family, inshallah ta'ala. So again, we thank you for your time. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless all of you, to keep you safe. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for afiyah. Ameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته